That should do it. No? I'm worried about eating the mic. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our wonderful students, our staff. Welcome to parents, grandparents, guests. Glad that you're all here this morning. One of the things that we all do, I know that all of you have parents who donate to various things, and we give our time, we give our money to things hoping that those will get to the right persons and do what they're supposed to do. But oftentimes we don't see where that goes. Well, this month, all of your offerings will go to missionary work. And we just happen to have the family that's doing that with us this morning. So, without any further delay, what I'd like to do is to introduce Mr. John Parr, his wife Nancy, and his daughter Sarah. And they'll take over right now. John, it's all yours.
Buenos días. Hay algunos, sí. ¿Quién habla español? Hay un poquito. That's all right. I won't just speak to you in Spanish this morning. But I will say, you have a chance to learn languages. It's a good time to learn languages at your age because your minds are like sponges. As you get older, your mind changes to more like a rock, and less can get in, and it only does through little cracks and crevices. How many of you remember us from last year? Last year, I shared last year with you. Yeah, obviously, the newer ones were like, oh, we have no idea who you are. But like Principal Ken said, that this is my wife Nancy, this is our daughter Sarah, and we've been in Mexico now for 14 years. And my wife and I grew up here in Delavan. We graduated from Delavan High School. So this is our home. So it's fun to come and be able to talk with you and share with you what's happening with us. And also maybe to give you a little glimpse. Sometimes you may think, oh, I'm in this little town of Delavan. What could God do with me? You know, and here we are in Mexico doing what God can do through us. So we've been in the village that we're in is just outside of the city of Cancun. We've been there now in that village for 11 years. And we teach English classes, actually to help people in the area to learn English because it can help them to get better jobs and stuff. I was teaching English for the last 6 years at the local junior high. This year transitioning out of that and doing more one-on-one and smaller classes in our community center. We have a small church congregation there with about six families, and we also have a children's ministry and a youth ministry, and we're really just about being a part of the community and spending time with the people and challenging them with what God's Word says and how it can relate to them. And I want to do that with you this morning. I want to talk to you about something that you might not think is talked about in the Bible, but who here likes salty treats, like potato chips? Who likes potato chips? Or pretzels, or you like the salty stuff sometimes. Sometimes you like salty mixed with sweet. I want to talk to you about what Jesus had to say about salt. And in Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, Jesus says, you, so say me, or I should say I. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. So here Jesus is talking about you and me, us, as being salt. Now, why would Jesus use salt? That's kind of strange. You know, what's your name? Addison. So Jesus is saying, Addison, you are the salt of the earth. Does that make any sense to you? No, not at all. And so you're like, I don't understand why Jesus is calling me salt. You know, now if you were, If you were to take and lick your hand, you're going to go, oh, that's kind of salty. We have salt within our bodies, but the reason Jesus is saying that you are the salt of the earth is for a couple of reasons, because he's comparing us to actual salt. How many of you like to watch cooking shows? I love Food Network. Oh, I love that channel, cooking channel. How many of you like to cook? How many of you, your parents let you cook? Who really likes to cook? Oh, I saw that hand go like this. What's your name? Leah. What's your favorite meal to cook? Like cooking everything? Anybody have a favorite meal you like to cook? Some what? Hot stuff? Pasta. I thought you said hot stuff. Well, pasta is hot stuff too. What kind of pasta? Oh, okay. Now when you're cooking, what's one ingredient you almost use all the time? What's one ingredient you use almost all the time? Salt. All the time you use salt when you're cooking. If you watch those cooking shows, they actually use a lot of salt. They're like, now salt kind of gets a bad rap. A lot of people say, oh, salt, it's not good for you. And yes, if you're consuming lots of salt, if you're eating lots of salt, or you're drinking, even, there are drinks that are even salty too, like Gatorade, Powerade, they all have salt in them. Apple juice, probably not, but, But when you're cooking, you use salt all the time. And this is why Jesus was telling you and me that we're the salt of the earth. Because salt seasons. Okay? Salt seasons. And what that means is when you put salt into a food, it makes the natural flavors of that food come out. So Jesus is saying, you know what? You're the salt of the earth. You need to season all of those around you. That when you are around them, you make the natural things, the good things come out of those people that are around you. That's why you're the salt of the earth. You're there to season. Salt is not doesn't change the flavor. That's what spices are for. Spices change flavor, but salt brings out the natural flavor. When you cook meat, you put salt on it, and it brings out the natural flavors of that meat. When you cook vegetables, it makes the flavor of vegetables be more profound. And it's important that we understand that we're supposed to magnify or bring out the presence of God in others and within ourselves. You're the salt, so you can help challenge others to show Jesus better. We're supposed to magnify the kingdom of God where we are. Another thing that salt does, when you eat potato chips, and you eat a lot of potato chips, what happens? What? I think I heard somebody say it. You want to keep eating them? Oh, yeah, okay. After you finish that huge bag of potato chips, then what? Your mouth is salty. These are all great answers. When you eat salty stuff, you get thirsty. Thirsty, and you need something to drink. That's another reason why Jesus is saying, you are the salt of the earth. You're supposed to help others become thirsty for God. As they see what God is doing in your life, then you are supposed to, they kind of go, I want, what's your name? David. Oh, I see David, and I see that he's going for God, and then all of a sudden he's like, I want what David's got. Oh my goodness, what's happening? Ah! But you know what? If you are being the salt that you're supposed to be, you're going to make others thirsty for what you have. And I would hope that what you would make others thirsty for is that they want to have a connection with God the way you have a connection with God. Where salt, it seasons, but it also causes and creates thirst. And if you have eaten a bunch of potato chips, you want something to drink, something that's refreshing. Because your body, you know why that is? You know why when you eat something salty, you want to drink something? Why? What? Tissue. Ooh. I think she is on the right track there. Tissues, not like tissues like you blow your nose with, but the tissues within your body, right? Ooh, you're a little smart cookie. That's exactly right. Your body is trying to balance these things within your tissues, within your body. If you get a bunch of salt in you, if you eat a bunch of salt and then you don't quench that thirst, you don't put the liquid back into the tissues, you get dehydrated. Salt will do that, so now you're thirsty, so you need to drink and replenish and fill those tissues back up with water. And so that's exactly what Jesus is telling us to do. You need to be around people, and because of that salt in your life, okay, salt being the presence of God, that they're going to want some of that, and then that's going to make them thirsty. So salt, it not only seasons, it not only creates thirst. Matter of fact, I want to share a brief story out of John chapter 4. It says, "So Jesus came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, and near the place of the ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well, and it was about the 6th hour." How many of you know what a well is? Okay. Well is where you've got water in the ground, and you've got to get that water out of the ground so you can drink it or you can use it. Some of you might have wells at your homes here. If you live a little bit out in the country, most likely you have a well. We have a well at our house in Mexico, and we have a pump that sucks the water out of the ground and puts it into a big holding tank on top of our house. And that's how we get water into our house. Some of you may not realize that when you turn that faucet on, where that water's coming from. If you don't live in the city, if you live out in the country, that water's coming from the ground. And even in the city, you've got to understand the water that you get, even though it goes through the city water plant and through the water tower, ultimately that water's coming from the ground. And so here Jesus was getting ready. He was tired and he wanted something to drink. And this woman comes to the well and she wants something to drink. She begins to draw water out. And Jesus asks her, "Could you give me some water?" And so she begins to give him some water. And then Jesus says to her, "Yeah, this water's fine, but you're going to be thirsty again. You can keep drawing from this well and keep getting water from this well, but you're going to keep getting thirsty and thirsty and thirsty." But Jesus says, "I have water for you that will quench your thirst. You'll never thirst again." Now, Jesus wasn't talking about natural water. He was talking about spiritual water. He was talking about the presence of the Holy Spirit. And she says to him, "Please give me this water." And so Jesus begins to talk to her about what he actually meant. Jesus has water for you, for me, spiritual water, so that we can drink from and not have to be thirsty again spiritually. He's given us life through himself. And so salt causes this thirst to happen, and we want water. We need water. But at the same time, remember, you are the salt. You're supposed to be seasoning those around you, bringing out the presence of God in their lives. You're supposed to be the one causing them to be thirsty, wanting more of God. And the third thing salt does, and this is something that maybe we aren't necessarily think of when we think of salt, but in Jesus' time, they used salt for another thing, and that was to preserve. Okay, so if you have meat, back then they didn't have refrigerators. Okay, can you imagine not having a refrigerator? Whew. You're very limited to what you can eat and everything you have. So they would have a piece of meat, and they literally would cover that piece of meat with salt. Not like sprinkles. We're talking salt would be like this thick on the meat. Just all around, under, over, the sides, and it would be encased. And they actually would rub that salt, and it actually would get the outside a little bit wet, and it would actually cause kind of like a, sometimes I forget English words. A crust. Thank you so much. It would cause a crust on the outside. It would be hard, and it would seal the meat. And so they could save that meat and use it at a later date without refrigeration. And see, God says you are the salt of the earth. Okay, so you're supposed to season, you're supposed to create thirst, but the other thing you're supposed to do is preserve. Now, how many of you like to swim? How many of you like to swim, but you can't swim very well? You're not a very good swimmer. Some of the younger ones, you're just learning how to swim, right? Sometimes when somebody can't swim, you have to throw them a life preserver. Okay, it's a different type of preserving. But when you preserve something, you know, if what's your name? Caleb. Okay, if you're swimming and then you're like, I'm getting tired, I can't swim anymore. And you're like, help, help, help. I have to throw you a life preserver. And what did I do by throwing you that life preserver? I just saved you, right? That's what preserving does. Whether you're talking about a life preserver when you're swimming, or you're talking about the salt on meat, is that like that salt is saving that meat to be used later on. And Jesus says, you're the salt of the earth. That means he wants to use you to preserve or to save others. Well, what does that mean? Well, he wants to use you to tell others about God's saving grace, about what Jesus did on the cross. He wants to use you to help preserve others because you are the salt of the earth. And that's something that we may not relate to a lot as far as the preserving, because we all have refrigerators, you know, and so we don't necessarily have to do that with our meats or with our foods. But we have to understand that that's what God has called us to do, to season people, to bring out the natural presence of God in their lives, to encourage them, to create thirst within them, that they want more and more of God, that they want to get closer and closer to him, and then to even preserve or to help save them, to lead them in that direction to where they can experience that. Now, it's interesting. Jesus says, if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. In this time, they would collect salt from the sea. And there is a bunch of minerals in that sea. And if the salt, sometimes the amount of minerals would be more than the amount of salt. And so therefore it wasn't good. So they literally would throw it on paths, and the only good it was to do was to kill weeds. Jesus is saying, you've got to be more useful than just killing some weeds. I want you to season people. I want you to create thirst within people. I want you to preserve and save people. Because if you're just that salt that gets tossed out on the path, then it's you that needs to experience the saltiness again. And you're the one that's going to need to find it at seasons and that it creates thirst. Salt is an interesting thing. It's something that we use every day. But it's not something that we think about every day. And I actually brought something for everyone, and I'm not sure how we'll do this. I don't know if it's something maybe we can pass out to everyone on the way out. But here, can you open that up there? This is Mexican candy. Now, I'm going to tell you, Mexican candy isn't always like American candy. this is something when I first started going to Mexico, I loved. Now it comes in a small packet, and within this packet is dried lime and salt. All the adults are going, oh, I know what that's good for. But this is something that when I went to Mexico the first time and I tried it, you're thinking, oh, but you can only put a little bit on your tongue, just a little bit at a time. And I would say, make sure your parents are around so you don't dump it all in your mouth. But I remember taking this and just to put a little bit, and oh man, that taste was so good. It was so tart, and you're like, ooh, salty and limey. And then it did exactly what I was talking to you about. It made me thirsty, and I wanted to get something to drink. So I bought a soda, and I drank the soda, and I did a little bit more, and I'm like, oh, I'm so thirsty again. Mexican candy is different. They like to use chili and lime in a lot of their candies. And you're like, oh, that's not sweet. Oh, but it's so good. But I want to give you guys this, whether you eat it or not. And I would say do not open this until you get home. Maybe some of the older kids could handle it, but at the discretion of the teachers. But this is something I want to give you to remember what I talked with you about this morning. You are the salt. Say this. I am the salt. I am the salt. I will season. I will make others thirsty. And I will help preserve others. This is a reminder for you. And if you eat it, you can keep the little package, I suppose. Put it in your room somewhere. You can see it every day and say, I'm going to be salty today. When you come to school, I'm going to be salty today. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means you're actually going to show others Jesus. So that doesn't mean when you go to school that you're going to be mean to others, because that's not being salty. It doesn't mean that when you go to school that you're going to be rude to your teachers, because that's not being salty. It doesn't mean that when you go to school that you're going to talk and gossip about others. Girls. I'm just kidding. That's not being salty. What it does mean, though, is that I'm going to show people love. I'm going to show people kindness. I'm going to be good. I want people to see the best of me. I want people to see Jesus in me. That's why I'm going to be salty. So this could be a reminder for you to be salty. How salty are you today? Are you salty? Not so salty? Very salty. That's a good answer. I wasn't going to come and lick you or anything. How salty are you? How salty are you? What is your attitude? What is your thinking? So when we leave here today, I think I'll just have Nancy and Sarah in the back. And we've got plenty, so adults, you can take one too, or 3 or 4, use them later if you like. But thank you so much for being so attentive while I've been speaking. I know for some of the littler ones, it's a lot harder to sit still. It's hard for me to sit still at times too. I understand that. But I'm so thankful that we could be here and share with you again this year. Hopefully again next year when we're back, we'll be able to do it. Next year when we're back, Sarah won't be here because Sarah's getting married in February. So she will be staying in Mexico. And so we'll be here by ourselves having a good time. But next year we hope that we can come and share with you again and encourage you this school year to be salty. Okay? Be salty. Be that person that affects those around you for the good. Don't be the person that affects those around you for the bad. Okay?
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Parr family for being here. It would be nice if you're going to be able to stay a while. Or yeah. So if they can maybe stay a while, perhaps they could come down and look through our school just a little bit, maybe pop into a classroom. So if they do, please make them feel welcome there in your classroom. We're trying to get back to doing a lot of the things that we did before COVID hit. And one of the things we used to do here was to take our tithes and offering collection by passing the plate. And so we have Mr. Holt, 4 of our wonderful and somewhat shy 8th graders. There you go. I'm not sure that they remember how to do this, so patience.